Hi everyone, it's Andrea Edwards, and this is part 2 of We Need a New Middle Class Dream. And today we're going to talk about pets. And now I know that this is something that could get a lot of pushback on, but we've got to face up to the situation that we're in, and pets is part of the story. Now, I've never considered myself an animal rights activist or anything like that. I've always been more focused on people. I figure if we can sort out people, then we won't have to worry about the animals because we'll be more conscious and therefore we'll take better care of the animals. But we've got to talk about pets. So let's get on with that. All right, our beautiful and adorable pets. And I am also a pet lover. And I have decided that I will not have any more pets based on what I know now. So I find that pets are a fascinating but a very much largely unaddressed issue in the conversation around the planetary crisis. And it's a really booming industry that we're not paying attention to here. So when I first arrived in Singapore back at the beginning of this century, it wasn't long after that that the government approved people living in HDB apartments, so that's basically how the majority of people in Singapore live, were finally given permission that they could have dogs. This was huge at the time, and while there were limitations on dogs, mainly sizes and types of breeds, before long, an explosion happened, including in puppy farms. I actually did a tour of one of these puppy farms with my son, and it wasn't a very nice place to visit. Then on business trips across the region, Thailand, South Korea, Taiwan, China, the Philippines, and beyond, at the night markets, which are very famous in this part of the world, you'd see cages and cages filled with these tiny little puppies because, of course, small dogs are the most appropriate for apartment living. But I think India was the most fascinating for me. I backpacked through India in 1995 and there were packs of dogs everywhere. They absolutely fascinated me. But pets back in those days were not such a common sight. In the last decade, on a business trip, this time specifically in Bangalore, I was walking down the street and I remember seeing a dog walker with 10 golden retrievers on leashes. And I thought, wow, okay, this is really happening. Pets are taking off in a big way. And I wasn't looking at it from an environment perspective at that time. I was looking at it from a change in society perspective. I've also seen the other side of pet ownership during the pandemic. Across the developing world, people couldn't afford to feed their families, so how could we expect them to feed their pets? Many pets were abandoned, and we also watched as people were forced to quickly leave to go home before the borders locked down. And unfortunately, that meant leaving their beautiful pets behind. It was heartbreaking and sad for everyone involved, and it also put enormous pressure on local charities like the Soy Dog Foundation and individual people who are out there really doing all they can for the animals that are in need in our communities. From an excessive consumption perspective, what we must come to terms with is where is all the food coming from to feed so many pets, not least the pet accessories and everything else that comes with owning a pet. I have pets, and this is a very flattering photo of our dog, Freddie. I think my friend Russell D. Russell must have taken it because he takes amazing photos of dogs. Freddie is also a lot grayer now than he is there, and he's a beautiful boy, and we all love him very much. Then we have the beautiful and very weird Riddick, who is the literal definition of a scaredy cat. And we have Xena. The whole family has given Xena the nickname Xena Princess Bitchface because she's absolutely beautiful and horrible at the same time. She's a massive bully to Freddie and Riddick. Plus, she has a very specific dietary requirement. And if we don't deliver, that tiny little meow booms through the whole house. So I'm a pet lover. I adore them. They're amazing. But I won't buy any more, maybe apart from rescues. I think that this will be the last that we will ever have. The problem is I just know too much now. And if we ever have to pack up and move quickly, which is very possible, and there's many reasons why it would happen, pets are a huge hindrance to being nimble. especially when you're having to cross international borders. And remember, I'm Australian. Taking pets from Thailand or Singapore into Australia is not an easy thing to do. But it's more about making sure that I don't add any more mouths to feed in this world. As I said, I know that this is a really difficult issue and I could get a lot of pushback from what we're talking about here. But all the way through this, I'm attempting to look our reality in the eye, and I'm also demonstrating the scale of the issue we face, and pets are part of that issue. We have only 4% of mammals on this planet that are considered wild animals. The rest are agricultural animals, humans, and our pets. We've got to address it. The global data on this is actually quite confusing. The exact number of people in the world who have pets is not known, but it is estimated to be over 1 billion. Another perspective, based on various global studies, it's estimated that 57% of us own pets, with dogs most popular, of course, followed by cats. So it could be a lot higher than 1 billion. When you look at the markets, you can see the EU and US are major markets for pets, but China is the huge market coming up behind. And living in Asia, I have seen this market go absolutely crazy in the last couple of decades. Here's just one example of a headline and the attitude towards pets in China, which really summed up the situation for me. So due to falling birth rates, pets are replacing children, but equally, a larger percentage of females are owning pets, especially dogs, and they have become emotional support animals. That means spending money on the best dog food in the world is, of course, something you do because this animal is everything to you. Another massive emerging market is India's pet care industry, which is growing at 13.9% annually, which is huge, by the way, making it one of the fastest growing pet care markets in the world. It's estimated that India's pet care industry will reach 800 million by 2025. So that's next year. Interestingly, in India, there are now 31 million pet dogs, but it has 80 million homeless cats and dogs as well. This is the growth expected for the pet food industry, according to Statista. However, 52% growth feels very, very low for me based on what I've been seeing. This is one of those sectors where it's really hard to get a global perspective, especially when it comes to finding the right data. So I had to keep looking, and recently, according to Bloomberg Intelligence, it could become a $500 billion industry by 2030. So that's a lot bigger than Statista's $170 billion industry. This is something we definitely need to get a handle on. Even if all of our pets go vegan, which is not going to happen and isn't necessarily the right path, especially for dogs, it's something we must take seriously. We can't keep growing the way we are growing, pets included. Let's have a look at all of the items pets need. And of course, dry and wet food, along with treats, are top of the list. Grooming products and technology. And this includes things like tracking collars or activity monitoring devices. So I figure Fitbits for dogs. In the UK, around 100,000 dogs have now been fitted with activity monitoring devices. We actually had to get a device for our cat, Xena Princess Bitchface, remember, because she loved to wander. And because her predecessor was stolen, and he was this dude called Luther, who was a white ragdoll cat, and we all adored him, so we were very devastated to lose him. But, you know, when you think about these technology trackers, it contributes massively towards the e-waste problem, which is going to be I've got 3 more to go, and that's one of them. What else is on the list of things that pets need? We've obviously got pet fashion, pet toys, pet furniture, supplements, medicine, poo bags and toilet training mats, accessories like a lead and collar, and all of the other things animal needs. So ball throwers, for example, toothbrush and toothpaste, and on I could go. It's a multi-million-dollar industry for very, very good reason. And here's a recent excessive consumption perspective from the US in 2023, where Americans spent $700 million just on pet costumes. You know, it's kind of a bit crazy, right? We can't keep growing the way we are growing. We desperately need a new middle-class dream, and we must think of everything we buy from a sense of scale. It's not just you buying a pet costume or buying a pet. It's 3.8 billion people who can now afford to buy these things. Based on the state of the planet, we need to recognize that we can no longer afford a pet industry hell-bent on growth. We also desperately need to focus on bringing wild animals back into nature. Peter Christie published a book about a decade ago called Unnatural Companions, and he got a lot of negative pushback on this book because it's a very sensitive and delicate subject. Some highlights include cats and dogs are responsible for the extinction of 74 species. As an Australian, this is one of those issues pet owners are very aware of, but equally, it's hard to keep your cats, especially from roaming. 2, cats kill birds and small animals, especially animals and birds that can't escape off the ground. In New Zealand, they have a lot of land-bound animals, and they are not used to these predators and are unable to escape. So they've certainly suffered devastating impacts of introducing cats and dogs into New Zealand. Roaming dogs killed wildlife, which of course they would because they are hungry and they need something to eat. The wildlife trade is enormous and brings with it pandemic risk, which we've all heard about a lot in the last few years. And for me, living in Asia for the last 20 years, this is a huge challenge and issue. I've been to these pet markets around Asia, and it's certainly not a wonderful place to visit. So what do our pets eat? Well, of course, they eat meat and fish. So where is it all coming from? And what damage is it causing? Overfishing, more agricultural animals to feed our pets, more deforestation, more phosphorus pollution into our rivers and oceans. You know, it's a problem, right? The reality is, in this book, Peter Christie claimed if dogs and cats were their own country, they would be the world's 5th largest meat consumer. I thought that was a really fascinating insight. This book was written 10 years ago, so maybe dogs and cats as a country would be ranked even higher now. One obvious option for our pets is plant-based food, and it's growing healthily at 56% growth year on year. But there is a lot of talk about pets needing more than plant food. Of course, that makes sense, especially for dogs. And this needs to be an industry where massive research and investment is made to find a solution good for the whole planet, not just for the pets or for those able to afford them. The other opportunity, of course, is insect-based protein for pet food. Now, many people across the world are very anti the idea of insect food, and they're actually quite horrified by it. But a large portion of the world still happily eats insects. I live in a country where insects are available wherever you go. But because it's a great form of protein, it's a strong solution open to us right now. However, we need to make sure the business of insect-based pet food is developed sustainably, or we will be doing more harm than good. And the good news is this is already happening with pet food, the primary growth area for insect protein, with a very strong 380% growth from 2017 through to 2027. So that's some good news in the mix. So keep an eye out for insect protein for your pets. And if you're looking for a really good business idea, this is one to get on top of. I actually talked to my husband about maybe this is a path that we should take, but neither of us could quite get our heads around it. But it's a massive growth area, and it's going to be a huge growth area moving into the future as well. So what are our options here? So the first thing is, obviously, we need to massively reduce the number of pets in the world, or at least make sure it's not continuing to grow at the scale it's growing. We are in a climate and biodiversity emergency, and we need to significantly reduce our impact on our natural environment in every way possible. Number 2, We need to set up countrywide neutering programs, especially for street animals, to ensure they stop breeding because they are a risk to local wildlife. In the developing parts of the world, this is a really, really critical issue, and we need governments backing this and funding it rather than just the charities doing it. What our pets eat has to become sustainable, plant-based or insect protein. We need to reduce anything meat or seafood related. Number 4, it needs to become very uncool to buy unnecessary accessories. The marketing for this industry must be addressed, and we need to recognise the additional waste it is creating. Everything we buy, whether it's for our pets or for ourselves, requires Earth's resources and energy to create. We need to reduce wherever we can. This is an obvious place to start. Unnecessary pet accessories really are a no-brainer. Number 5, topics like this can and should be addressed in the world's classrooms. If children become aware, they will pressure parents not to buy pets or anything unnecessary for pets. Let's empower the kids, because the desire for pets often comes from them, right? That's the reason we got them. Number 6, government legislation must support any change here. So please speak to your local, state, and national governments. This is a huge problem that needs to be addressed along with all of the other issues we face. But this is an area where it's a very specific focus where the governments can get behind and do something about it. Number 7, probably the biggest issue here is recognizing we have a scale problem, and then we need to start doing something about it. We, as humans, must massively reduce our impact, but that extends to every aspect of our lives. And with pets, if we keep this sector growing, then the problem is only going to become a greater problem, right? Makes sense, yes? Rethinking pets. So what can we do about it? You and I, what can we do? So the first is, I really, really want to encourage everyone who has pets not to feel guilty about having them. I went through this a few years ago, and it's completely pointless. They're already here. They already exist. They need our love, right? So let's not do that. We are where we are, and when we know, we change. So cherish and love your fur babies because they deserve our love. But what can you do to ensure their impact is reduced? That's the critical point. Number 2, what our pets eat is obviously a big part of this issue, especially when it comes to overfishing, deforestation, phosphorus pollution, and on it goes, including all the way through to microplastic pollution. We must start to focus on and demand plant-based food or insect-based food for our pets. This is not something available everywhere, and it's obviously something we can focus on. Number 3, adopt, don't shop, and please avoid those puppy mills. There are hundreds of thousands of animals in shelters and rescue centres all around the world that need a home. So let's make sure we start there if we want to get a pet for our family. I absolutely appreciate that not everyone wants to adopt a pet because, whether it's you've got specific breeds in mind or because some rescue breeds aren't that appealing. However, we have a scale issue, so we need to address that. 3.8 billion middle-class people cannot all have pets if we want to have a sustainable planet. Number 4, please go easy on the accessories and try not to buy anything cheap and nasty which will fall apart quickly. We also need to recognise that all of the plastic in pet accessories is not good for our pets either, as chemicals and microplastics will be ingested by them too. The same goes for pet food in plastic packaging. It goes into our body, so we must presume that it's the same for pets and it will do similar damage to them too, right? Number 5, let's make sure that we're all getting our pets neutered so we're not growing the problem of pets in the world. And if you can, maybe look at community pets that you share with your community so everyone can get to enjoy them, but we don't need everyone owning them. Why not? We're seeing old people's homes having dogs or cats that everyone enjoys. Why can't we look at doing that on a broader basis? We've got to scale it down, we've got to look at different ways of doing that. So that's just one idea. Number 6, let's start talking to our family and friends about this as a growing issue that needs to be addressed. We think it's just one dog, but if 3.8 billion people said that and got one dog, we can see the issue has the potential to become massive, right? So talk about it, share ideas, strategies for communicating the issue and the culture you live in, because there's a lot of nuance here. So I think that's an important thing that we can all do. And number 7, climate change is really bad for pets. Not only are our wild animals and farm animals going to struggle to survive in a warmer world, so are our pets. We heard about a lot of dogs getting burnt paws in the US heat waves in 2023 because the ground became so blisteringly hot. But they also get grumpier in the heat and could become more aggressive. So keep an eye out for that. Right now, our animals are all staying inside under fans for the last month while the heat has gone up. But the real heat extremes are expected in April and May. So what we've done is we've identified a path where our dog can leave the house to do his ablutions, because of course that needs to happen, without stepping on the hot concrete path. So wherever you live, if you're living in a place where heat extremes are going to be real, make sure you're checking out a potential path for your dog to be able to stay at least on the grass or the dirt versus being on concrete, which gets significantly hotter in extreme heat events. A warming world is not great for us or our pets, and we know that, but food inflation is going to continue to increase as drought, extreme weather events, and crop loss keep happening in higher and higher numbers. That means it will also become a lot more expensive to have a pet in the first place. Just feeding them is going to become a greater expense. So for those who don't have a lot of money, this is something to keep in mind before you get a pet. Well, thank you so much for joining me for, what is it, section 6 now, pets. This is a very delicate topic and it needed to be handled as such. So I hope I did that. However, I just really hope that everyone can see we have an issue here and we need to address it. If we don't have the courage to face up to the issues of scale, there is very little chance we can overcome. As I've said from the beginning of this series, the biggest challenge we have is scale, and with nearly 50% of the world's population middle class, we need to look it in the eye and say, what can we keep? What must we change? And what do we need to stop doing? I'd love to connect with you, so please follow me on social media. You can see all of my handles here, or come and join the Facebook group, 1 Billion People with Uncommon Courage, and let's come together to create a global community committed to action. 1 billion people acting and driving change can create the human tipping point we need. Once we reach 1 billion, we only need each person to recruit 3 to 4 more people each, and then we will be in a position to drive the runaway changes required. We also have to believe we can do it, and then we all need to get to work. So I will see you for the next one where we are going to discuss war. Bye, guys.